All right, so what movie do you guys want to see me read terrible reviews for today? Oh. Oh no. No. Not you. Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and tonight, as you can see from the beginning, I'm going to be reading terrible reviews of The Exorcist. Now, although I am a Halloween guy, and I have stated that many times on my channel, and I don't hide from that, I consider The Exorcist to be the greatest, technically, horror film ever made. So, having to go look through terrible reviews posted by probably anonymous 15-year-olds online dragging this movie is going to hurt my heart. But one of my viewers, T. Parker Evans, asked me to do it. I'm a man of the people. So without further ado, let's do it. So, the first review is from Sudan S. It is a 1-star review and says, could not even make it through the whole movie. So boring and no jump scares. Okay, are we gonna do this? Shouldn't even be named horror, as I was the least scared I'd ever been. Harry Potter was scarier to me. Would not recommend for anyone looking for quick horror. After an hour and 8 minutes, I had to put down the movie because nothing had happened. Don't waste your time. Holy crap. Okay, so let's just elephant in the room here. You turn The Exorcist off halfway through. The back half of the movie is really when everything kind of hits the fan. So, you weren't into the... You didn't need... Furthermore, jump scares. What is up with the incessant need to point out the lack of cheap scares in some of these classic horror movies? The Exorcist actually does have a couple, but that is not at all the type of horror that The Exorcist is. I understand if you found it kind of plodding along and, boring, because it really is a drama with an exorcism taking place in the midst of it. But what? And not to be outdone, Charles C. comes in with a 1-star review and says, by far the most overrated horror movie ever, with insufferable characters, a very slow and boring pace to it. Makes the only thing scary about The Exorcist is how bad the film actually is. Okay, so let's just ignore the fact that your grammar is trash. But, so, wait a second. Terrible characters? I mean, did we watch the same movie? Ellen Burstyn in this movie? What? What? Max von Sydow? I mean, never mind the fact that Linda Blair was a child and pulled all that off, and whew, wow.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Alright guys, we're really off to a rip-roaring start because these are really pissing me off already. Brad G comes in with 1 star and says, this film in 1973 might have been the scariest film of all time, but in 2023, it's one of the most ridiculous films of all time. Some of the dialogue is straight out of a soap opera. Most of the FX are dated, and it shows. Very slow pacing, followed by some horrible acting from some of the cast, and what you have is a mess of a film that used to be a contender, but now has been retired to the $5 bin. Oh my goodness. Okay, so, as I said with a previous reviewer, what is up with people dumping on the acting? The acting in this movie is incredible. It's incredible. Again, I will cede the point to you that if you're not into that kind of slow burn drama horror, that if you find it boring, I'll cede that to you. Whatever. Okay, sure, it's boring. But what? Stop. Lou L says, not scary at all, and a bit funny. Nothing like I was told. Very disappointing. Okay, so I've actually had this conversation with people throughout the years, and it's an interesting thing to get brought up when you talk about it, because there will be people nowadays that find some of The Exorcist humorous. And I actually think that is their body's way of dealing with that uncomfortability and that fear, because a lot of it is some of the dialogue that Reagan says, or some of her actions specifically with the crucifix. And that is not at all funny. like at all funny. When you're actually thinking about it from, just looking at it like this is a child that is supposed to be inhabited by a demon, it's just messed up. Like in every way, every conceivable way, it is completely messed up. And I feel like sometimes humor is a reaction that, like, smiling and smirking and giggling sometimes is a reaction that our body has to dealing with something that is uncomfortable in an uncomfortable situation. And I feel like that might be this here, or this person's a psychopath. I don't know. Our next review comes from John B., who gives it 1.5 stars and says, "They say this is the scariest movie of all time. No, it's not. There's not scary stuff. It's as scary as a pile of kittens." I mean, if those kittens had rabies, like, they'd be scary, whatever. But that's not why I don't like the movie. I don't like it because when I saw this movie, I was thinking, God save me from this seemingly endless nightmare of a movie. It's really hard to give, like, any credence to this specific review simply just because you don't mention why you don't like it. Like, you can have spirited debate with somebody about liking or disliking something if you have your reasons. Everybody has their reasons, and that's fine. There's nothing mentioned here. It's very vague, and you don't say why you didn't like it. So, John, your review, my friend, sucks.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Aurora B comes in with a 1.5 star review and says, "What a film. When they said this is The Exorcist, I burst into tears and started to get up and scream, 'I'm gonna exorcise.' It was truly one of the moments of all time. Bravo, Vince Gilligan, or whoever the fuck worked on this film." Okay, I think that was a troll review. I'm not cutting this out. This is staying in. Sadie D gives 1 star and says, "It was not scary at all, and personally thought it was more funny than scary, but that just may be my humor." Yeah, or you're a psycho. I don't. Miles B gives it 1.5 stars and says, "Horror, classic, failed to scare. The storyline is the first of its kind, but that's where the compliments end. Storyline is hard to follow, and the first 30 or so minutes seem pointless to the story. The Exorcist doesn't compare to other classics like The Conjuring or Insidious. If you want a scary movie about demons, skip this and watch The Conjuring." Okay, so that is clearly somebody that is younger. And as somebody that loves The Conjuring, it's not old enough to call it a classic, first of all. And to compare, that is so wild. Like, I'm just like wrapping my brain around this. To say something to the effect of, The Exorcist doesn't compare to other classics like The Conjuring and Insidious. Movies that not only would not be here without The Exorcist, but are also nowhere near old enough to be classics. Though I love them. Yo. Yuan W says, "By far the most overrated horror film of all time." Oh my god. Okay, so again, you're not giving any reasons. I can't argue with your statement because you didn't give any reasons as to why you think it's overrated. Having said that, that is a take with this movie a lot. It's not far-fetched to hear people say that The Exorcist is overrated, especially people nowadays that want to seem edgy. I don't think it's overrated at all. I think it's a landmark horror film. It's literally right there with Jaws and Halloween, and like, it's just movies that what, you can't say anything about it. Like, it has the reputation it does for good reason. Having said that, please give reasons. Please. James D. I just gotta say, with all these people's last names just starting with a D, it has been really hard not to make a D's joke. Anyway, James D. with a 1/2 star review says, "Traumatized for many years after watching this as a young kid. Please stick to the advisory rating, as it is a genuinely scary film and it will cause underage viewers issues. For an old film, it was agreed if its time, the suspense building was off the scale, and it was very well done for a horror, but overall the promotion of horror, in my opinion, is not a good thing for..." Oh god, here we go. All right. Okay. All right. So, terrible grammar again. It like makes my brain hurt sometimes reading these. But this review is clearly someone that is saying it's a great movie, but horror movies in general shouldn't exist. They're evil and they're poisoning society. Maybe. Jeff L. says, "Ellen Burstyn's character was annoying. Okay, well, first of all, you spell your name as Geoff. So, like, shut up. Andrew A. comes in with a 1-star review and says, probably an important piece in film history, but it's been expanded on too many times to hold up well today. Also, it's just overall pretty ridiculous. So your argument for why you're giving The Exorcist a negative review is because it's been copied so many times that now the subgenre itself is played out. Even though this is the pioneer of said subgenre. Like a Anon shitposter gives it 1.5 stars and says, I think it's boring. Coherently boring. You didn't put your name, shitposter, but I can't argue with you because you said it's coherent. You just found it boring. I'll respect that. Another anonymous reviewer comes in with a 1.5-star review and says, not scary. I was so excited to watch this because I was told how scary it was. Unless you find vomit scary, this was not scary at all. The exposition took way too long, and there was barely any build-up. I'd watch it again, but not to be scared. Another anonymous reviewer with 1.5 stars says, a terribly boring ordeal that is completely overrated. Another anonymous reviewer comes in with a 0.5-star review and says, let's be honest with ourselves. Not only does this movie not hold up, but it also is a bad take on an amazing story. Maybe if you like the cult aspect of it, knock yourself out. We need not a remake of this movie, but a direct retelling of the book for the modern day. Does this person know? I don't even like... Are we talking about the same movie? Are you lost? Are you supposed to be on a different thread? Another anonymous reviewer comes in with 2.5 stars and says, well-made exploitation, but exploitation nonetheless. So technically adept, in fact that it's hard to dismiss as simple trash. Unfortunately, technically proficient is all it is. Friedkin lends no sympathy to his characters, and the audience is supposed to delight in their tortures. I mean, I don't think there's supposed to be really any sympathy here. This is just a tragic story for everybody involved. And while it is well documented that the directing style used with this film by Friedkin was a little not kind at times, I feel like that's what makes the movie so effective at the same time, is that a lot of these performances are real. They're lived in. Weird complaints. Another reviewer that wishes to remain anonymous gives it 2.5 stars and says, what a bore. How is this movie considered a classic? It sucked. It was boring and the entire movie was cringe. But you gave it 2.5 out of 5. You rated it average and said it was absolute trash.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
And my brain is beginning to hurt, so this will be the last one that we read. It is another anonymous reviewer. They give it 1 star and said, this classic film might have been scary or new to audiences in 1973, but today it is considered hilarious to some. In my opinion, I felt it was slow-moving and boring. The demon possession scenes were the best part. The acting was mediocre and nothing great. All in all, I give this film 1 golden movie box up. So there seems to be a common thread here with a lot of the complaints about this movie. Now, there were a few that we pointed out that were just outlandish and some even trolling. But a lot of the legitimate complaints people had about this movie and why they rated it negatively was because they found it boring. They thought it was slow. They didn't like its pace. I think that just comes from what these demonic possession movies have become nowadays. There are a lot of cheap jump scares and things that go bump in the night, whereas with The Exorcist and a lot of films of that time, it was more about the slow burn and the build-up to. The climax of The Exorcist is definitely eventful. It is kind of jam-packed with stuff. But this is a drama that masquerades itself as a horror film. And I mean that as a compliment. This is truly a tragedy that follows a family and a little girl and a priest and how all of that intersects and all of their own arcs that they go on and their demons that they deal with, both literal and figurative. There's a lot about this movie that is so much deeper than the surface level. And you really have to buy into it. And I feel like I understand if somebody didn't buy into it because they found it boring. It wasn't doing enough. It wasn't punchy enough for them. You can't really argue with that. That's your opinion. That's your tastes. And I respect it to a degree. But it doesn't mean I agree. And I don't agree. I don't find this movie to be boring or to be slow. I think the pace works really well for the type of movie that this is. But it gets to a point as you get older where you have to start to realize that, like, some people, this is never going to be their taste. This is never going to be what they gravitate towards. And no matter how competently a film is made and how well it's acted and shot and scored, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, it didn't give them what they wanted. So they'll go for the more modern ghost movies. And that's fine. But The Exorcist, in my opinion, it's still the GOAT. So T. Parker Evans, thank you so much for requesting this one. This jumped out to me, and I was like, I've got to do this one. Because I know you know, and a lot of you watching know, this is what I would consider to be the greatest horror movie of all time. So even just reading some of these reviews, and believe me, I skipped a lot because it was just like, oh, this is boring, this is bland, lame. I was like, I'm not even going to read that because I've heard very similar things as I've gone through this. So I had to do this one. And as to be expected, it broke my heart in many different ways and made me sad. But I want to hear down below what you guys thought of this video, what you thought of some of these reviews, and what do you think of The Exorcist today, 50 plus years later? Comment that down below in the comment section. Please make sure to leave a like on the video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Nick. I thank you so much for stopping in at the Lost River Drive-In, but I'm pulling out.